When my daughter-in-law forbade me from attending my grandson's birthday party because I smelled bad, I changed the locks on my house and now there won't be a party. I don't know how to start. I've read hundreds of posts here, but now that I'm sitting down to write mine, I'm not sure what information to include and what to omit. I am 66 years old and a single man. I lost my wife 3 years ago, and since then, I've been alone. In fact, I'm devastated. Next Sunday is my grandson's birthday, and my daughter-in-law has not invited me to the party. I didn't even know there was a party planned until my friend, who was their neighbor, told me that his granddaughter received an invitation card for my grandson's birthday. He didn't know I hadn't been invited. We go for walks together in the mornings. On our way to the walk, he talked to me about the party. It was shocking because I'm very close to my grandson, and he loves me too. He turns one next Sunday. When my friend told me about the party, I thought it was a small cake-cutting event just with the neighbors' kids. But my friend told me the party was going to be big, and not just the kids, adults were invited too. The invitation says the child's name +1. The invitation also includes a dinner. This was incredible because my son isn't doing well financially to spend so much money on his son's party. I replied to my friend that he was exaggerating, but then he sent me a picture of the invitation card. He was right. The party looked big. It left me wondering why I wasn't invited to the party, making me anxious. To calm myself, I said maybe they forgot to invite me, or maybe the invitation is on the way. There were still 12 days left for the party, so my anxiety worsened, and I went to see my grandson. When I arrived, I saw my daughter-in-law engrossed in her phone while my grandson played alone on the grass. I picked him up and played with him while my daughter-in-law watched from the window. My daughter-in-law has always been resentful of me. She never liked me or my wife. I really don't understand the reason behind her dislike, but maybe she thinks we were inferior to her. Actually, she is from a wealthy family, but we are not rich. We're not poor, but we don't have as much money as her father. Besides money, it's also a matter of social status. Her father is a lawyer, but I'm just a mechanic and have a workshop. If she is proud of her father's money, then it's an empty pride because her father despises her and doesn't give her a cent even when she needs it the most. Last year, during COVID, when my son lost his job, their finances were severely affected. She is a housewife, so they only had one source of income. Losing that job was a severe blow to them. They started living off their savings, but eventually, those ran out too. My workshop business also shrank during the COVID lockdown. However, I helped them as much as I could, but my finances were tight too. Their situation became so bad that they couldn't pay the rent on their house and received an eviction notice from the landlord. I lived alone, so I offered them to move into my house while I moved to the workshop. I have a 2-bedroom house with a children's room. I could have stayed in my house with them, but I knew my daughter-in-law would be uncomfortable being near me. That's the background of my situation. When I went to see my grandson this morning, I thought my daughter-in-law would talk to me about their birthday plans, but to my disappointment, she didn't say a word. Until now, I hoped they had forgotten to invite me, but now it seems evident that she doesn't want me there. It breaks my heart to think about what I did wrong to receive this treatment. I've always tried to make their lives comfortable to help them, and this is what I get in return. Update 1. Thank you for all the kind words. You are right. We in-laws, especially in our 60s, are treated like third-class citizens by our daughters-in-law. It feels very lonely in this world. Your 60s really are a difficult time. It's like you're too old to live and too young to die. I tell you, my friend, if you have a partner in your 50s and 60s, cherish them because you're gonna miss them like hell. I never felt the need for a friend until I had my wife, but after her passing, my life is so empty. Yesterday, my son called me and said they would drop off my grandson. They were going shopping. Yes, I take care of my grandson for them because hiring a babysitter costs money, and here this old man offers free service. They know how to exploit me emotionally, financially, and in every possible way. When they came back to pick him up, I asked my son, "Are you done shopping for the party?" My son's face turned pale. His car was full of stuff in the back seat, and some decorative things were sticking out of the rear window. He just brushed it off and said, "Oh, no, there's no party. We just bought some toys for the baby, that's all." He's not good at lying. I looked at him seriously and said, "I saw the invitation card they gave to the neighbors." Before my son could say anything, my daughter-in-law shouted, "So what? Are you mad because you needed an invitation to a child's birthday party? Are you a little kid?" The way she defended it made me angry. I was furious, but I responded calmly, "Watch your tone, Mom." My son said he would visit me the next day to settle the matter. I kept waiting, but he didn't show up. How naive of me to think he would come to apologize for his wife's behavior and ask me to join the party. I know what you're thinking, old fool. Yes, that's me. I was wondering how they could manage the expenses of such a big party. Then I realized they were organizing a party with my money. Last month, my son asked me for a loan to pay his car installment. He said he had defaulted for 2 months, and now the bank was chasing him for the payment. He promised to pay me back this month. Whenever he asks for money, I know he won't return it, yet I lend it to him. I know I'm lenient with him, but look at my situation. I only have one son I can call family. I have only a few years left. What am I going to do with my money? In the end, it's going to go to him, so why not give it to him when he needs it? Until now, I never asked him to repay the money I lent him, but today I called and asked for the money I lent him last month. I said, "You promised to repay it this month, right? So where is it?" He never expected his dad to ask him to return the money. I said, "I want the money by this week as you promised." He said, "What?" I stated, "You heard me right. I want my money by this week." He came to visit me in the afternoon. I confronted him about his wife's resentment towards me. He said he was aware but couldn't do much. I said, "Of course you can't make your wife like me, but you can surely stop lying to me for money. I know you lied about the car mortgage to borrow the money for this birthday party. I also know this party isn't just for kids. Their parents are invited too, and that includes dinner." "Really? You have that much money to feed your friends and neighbors, but not for me? Whose money are you using for the event?" After my outburst, he said, "Are you mad because we didn't invite you? If so, it's not me. Sandra, my daughter-in-law, made the guest list." I shouted, "And you have no say in it. Is Sandra's decision some sort of law that can't be questioned or changed? Are you telling me you're okay with your wife not inviting your father to your son's first birthday? And for no reason at all?" He remained silent with a somber face. What else could he do? He's too weak to open his mouth in front of his narcissistic wife. He's helpless to defend himself against me because he needs my money. Sometimes I blame myself for not raising a strong son. Update 2. I was determined not to take any revenge, but guess what I did? Sandra, my daughter-in-law, crossed all limits of toxicity and manipulation on the birthday. I was sitting in a corner of my workshop, drinking and brooding, when I got a call from my son. I was so stupid to think that maybe his guilty conscience had awakened and he was calling to invite me to the party. Don't curse me if I say that I even bought gifts for my grandson. I thought that if they invited me at the last minute, I would have to hurry. I know I surpassed all levels of desperation. I thought that even if they didn't invite me, I owed my grandson a gift, and I would give it to him the next day. To shatter my illusions, the call was to babysit my grandson. He had to rush to the office for some urgent work. He said Sandra had gone to pick up her parents from the airport. Hearing this, I lost my mind. I mean, her parents are flying in from 2 states away, but I'm not invited, and I live a block away. Before I could say anything, he said he was already in his car, leaving the baby alone in the crib, so I should hurry. Without thinking twice, I ran to babysit my grandson. While playing with him, the phone rang. I ignored it a few times, but it kept vibrating. I thought it must be an emergency call, so I answered. It was Sandra, thinking she was talking to my son. She was calling him to give some instructions about the decorations. She had been calling his phone, but he wasn't answering. She got angry hearing my voice. I told her I wasn't invading her house. Her husband had to rush to the office urgently, so he requested that I babysit his child. She screamed at me, asking me to get out of the house because she didn't want her parents to see me. I said, "How do you expect me to leave the child alone at home?" She said she would be there in an hour, and the child could manage alone until then, but she didn't want me in her house when her parents arrived. She said I smell like fuel and oil, and my hands and clothes are dirty with grease. I look filthy, and she doesn't want her parents or anyone to see me in her house. I felt humiliated by this. It was outrageous. I cried like a baby, holding my grandson in my arms. I can't explain how terrible I felt at that moment. Quickly, I got up to leave because if she arrived and saw me there, she would scold me mercilessly. As I was closing the door behind me, an idea came to mind. Damn it, it's my house. Yes, that's right, I gave them my house to live in as a goodwill gesture. And no, they don't pay me rent. I thought, lady, I've stopped being a doormat. I quickly called my workers with toolboxes. They helped me change the locks of the house, packed their clothes and other belongings, and threw them on the front porch. They just threw all their clothes in some boxes I had in the workshop. All the big items like furniture and electronics were mine. They didn't bring any. After that, I held my grandson and strolled on the front lawn, waiting for Sandra to arrive. As soon as I saw her car pulling into the driveway, I approached, handed her the baby through the window, and walked towards my workshop. She sat the baby in the car, or maybe gave him to her parents, and came after me, screaming. She yelled, asking why I was still here when she had asked me to leave. I didn't even bother to look at her or respond. I just said, "If you need help moving your things out, call me." Before she could react or understand, I walked away. A few minutes later, my phone was exploding with her calls. I ignored them. Then she sent voice messages asking why the lock wasn't opening and why their things were outside the house. I laughed at her messages, thinking, "Woman, get the hint, you're homeless now." I went to my workshop and sat at the entrance. I knew she or my son would show up soon. Sure enough, there he was, rushing towards me. I said, "Before you get any evil thoughts, let me tell you, there are cameras installed everywhere, and they're fully functional." She screamed and basically repeated the same thing, why the house wouldn't open. I said I changed the locks, and the key is inside the workshop, smelling of oil and grease and other nuisances. Do you want to touch that key? She was stunned, pulled her hair, and screamed asking why I changed the locks. I stared at her seriously and responded, "Remember, that house is mine. I did you a favor by letting you all live there." She interrupted me and said, "Then why did you throw our things outside?" I said, "Because I changed my mind. Now I don't want you to live there anymore." She stomped the ground, got back in her car, and left. I knew this wasn't over. After a while, my son showed up with eyes red from crying. That's his manipulation technique. He said, "Dad, please give us the keys. I promise you that Sandra will be nice to you. She will apologize." I stopped him right there. "Really? Sandra will apologize to me. Where is she?" His face lit up, and he asked me if Sandra apologized, would I give them the house back? I said, "I don't know, I might consider it depending on how she does it." He got up to call Sandra. By the way he was talking, it seemed like she wasn't ready to apologize. But within 10 minutes, she arrived. She started by saying, "Look, I'm sorry." I said, "Wait, let's sit inside the workshop and talk." She was reluctant to enter, but my son gave her a look, and she followed us inside, covering her face with the napkin. Her apology seemed more like a favor to me. She said, "Okay, I'm sorry, I won't yell at you again. Give us the keys. My parents are waiting outside, they're tired from the trip." I was baffled by her way of apologizing. I looked at my son with wide eyes. She continued, "Okay, I'm sorry again. Enough with the faces, our guests will arrive soon. We need to arrange everything. And yes, you can also join the party. But please wear new clothes." I couldn't stand her tone anymore. I stood up and shouted, "Out, just get out of here and never show your damn face again. You will never have the house back, not even when I die." Instead of apologizing for her behavior, she started yelling at my son. "See? I told you, he won't listen, we should call the police." He shook her hands off and yelled back at her, "That's his house, we can't call the police on him. The police will criticize us for mistreating him." They left the workshop, shouting at each other. My friend who lived next door said Sandra and my son went back and told her parents what had happened. Maybe she was trying to twist the truth. When my son stepped in and explained the whole truth, her parents were heard shouting at her. Update 3. My loser's son showed up at my door again. A week had passed since I kicked him out. It was almost midnight when I heard a knock on the door. I opened it and told him I had no business with him. He took my hands and began pleading with me to let him into the house. He said he had been living in the car for a week. He didn't have enough money to rent another house with his income. It's hard to make ends meet, even for household expenses. He started crying, saying he couldn't afford the rent. I told him, "Why don't you ask your pampered wife to get a job?" He said she simply doesn't want to work. She considers herself a prize for him because she was out of his league. I burst out laughing. "Sure, then show off your trophy to get some bread. This old man has done enough for all of you." I told him, "Your wife has always been narcissistic to me, yet I gave you all my support. I gave up my house and lived in the garage because I loved you and wanted you to be comfortable. What did you give me in return? You allowed your wife to humiliate me. Don't you have the guts to take a stand? If you have a golden wife, and you surely can't displease her, then live with that gold and don't come to me for help." He tried his last card by saying, "Please, Dad, give us the house for the sake of your grandson." I responded, "Enough with the emotional manipulation. Don't you dare try to blackmail me any longer. So far, you've extorted me for my money and my house by saying, 'Dad, please don't do this for the sake of your son.' Now that card isn't working. You're using your son to get your way. Get out of here. You're not getting anything." The next day, he showed up with his wife and son. I said, "I won't accept an apology. It's not about birthday invitations. The hate is deep-rooted. She hates me because of my job. She considers it insignificant. I won't allow anyone to mock my profession. Mechanic jobs can be dirty, and our hands might be stained with oil and grease, but they involve skills. What do you have? You're unemployed just because you're beautiful. And the fact that your dad is a lawyer doesn't give you the right to humiliate others." She fell to her knees and begged for forgiveness, but I slammed the door in her face. I don't want any contact with that toxic woman and her spineless husband. I know it's not the end of the world for them to be kicked out of the house. Eventually, they'll be able to rebuild their lives. I also know they will never forgive me. In fact, they are going to fill my grandson with bitterness towards me. But that's okay. I've already given enough of myself to be nice to my daughter-in-law. I've learned the hard way that even if you give your life, some people will never appreciate you. Now I'm fine with that. I'm fine being called a grumpy and selfish old man who kicked out his son, daughter-in-law, and one-year-old grandson to live on the street. The only regret I have is for my grandson. That little creature has no idea what kind of parents he has. He's living an uncomfortable life because of his stupid parents, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Update 4. My daughter-in-law tried to break into my house but failed, and the police took her away. After her last attempt at an apology, which as you read was quite pathetic, she tried to sneak into my house. She came in the middle of the night, broke a window and tried to get in. But as an old man, I'm a light sleeper, so when I heard, I called the police. I didn't know it was my daughter-in-law. I just thought it was someone trying to rob me. I'm thankful that the only weapon I have is in the workshop, because that could have been quite bad. Back to the topic, even if I had known it was my daughter-in-law, I still would have called the police. She had already gotten in and was looking for my keys when the police arrived, and I turned on the lights. So she couldn't escape. She was taken into custody for trespassing. She called my son, who then came to my house yelling in the morning about how I had done all this. According to him, my grandson can't be without his mother. He also asked if I could take care of the child while he tried to get her out of jail, although I don't know with what money he plans to do that. I told him absolutely not, and that I was thinking of calling Child Protective Services because they were clearly not being good parents. Finally, he left. Although that last part wasn't just an empty threat, I'm certainly considering it. Besides, some commenters had suggested it before. Update 5. Well, there are good and bad news in this update, although none bad for me. To start, my daughter-in-law's father traveled to help his daughter, though he was very upset. And not only because his daughter was now in jail, but also because the day they traveled for the birthday party, everything that was happening came to light. So my daughter-in-law's father was very upset with her. He helped her get out of jail, but as I understand it, he cut all contact with her afterward. I know this because my son told me one day when he came to ask for the house back. So after he left, later that day, I called Child Protective Services, who took my grandson and placed him with me, as I am the closest direct relative. I don't know what will happen now, as this is temporary, but I am happy to spend time with my grandson. We even celebrated his birthday together, where I was able to give him my gifts. He is still too young to understand what is happening, although he senses something.